Hello everyone and welcome back to Just Another Sim Guy. I'm just going to try something a little bit different today. Um, you'll see there's some race footage going on in the background, but what I actually want to talk about and muse and get some feedback on is how sim racing has improved for me some of my real life driving skills. And I'm interested to get other people's thoughts on this. I've done a look into some people that have researched this, some people that have given their opinions on different things. There are some things that are obvious, um, I think, from just having the experience of cornering, braking, doing things smoothly, um, to things that are a bit less obvious and probably not thought about. Um, but for me, it's just quite an interesting topic. So I just wanted to share some of the things I've discovered, share my point of view, and perhaps start a dialogue on what everybody else thinks. So, so just to give you a bit of a brief summary on me, I am 50 years old. I've been driving since I was 17 and passed my test just before my 18th birthday. I have never had a gap in my life where I haven't had a car. I've driven lots and lots of different cars, low power, high power. Currently, I'm lucky enough to have a 5-litre Mustang, um, 2017 GT, so that can be a bit of a handful, but I don't drive like an idiot by any means. But I've had little 1-litre runarounds, family cars, um, people carriers, all sorts of stuff over the years. I consider myself quite a safe driver, quite considerate. Um, I don't drive like an idiot, even when I've had fast cars. Um, even when I was in my very young, sort of what you'd call boy racery type days, never really drove like an idiot. Probably nowhere near as sensible as I am now, because you're not that considerate at that age, are you? But I've never really had accidents. I'm sort of reasonably well aware of what's going on around me. I've never had any problems driving. I picked it up quite quickly. So even in real life, I don't think sim racing was going to be a new experience for me in terms of being able to turn a wheel, um, and use my feet for braking and clutch and that sort of thing. So, um, but I'm aware that some people do it the other way around. Some people are quite young now getting into sim racing, and you know, it's more about them, and it's more about how those good habits and what can they do good skill wise that's going to help them when they do get in a real life car, and to not be too overconfident and be aware that it's still can be a dangerous undertaking, and that just because you think you're safe, there might be lots of stuff going on around you where things happen that are nothing to do with how safe you are, and they're completely out of your control. So it's, again, the racing side of it, I think, helps you be aware of what's going on around you and sometimes anticipate other people's mistakes. When you're online, that happens. You think of things like iRacing with their safety rating. The people that are up there, um, and successful are the ones that can avoid accidents and anticipating them happening, and that's going to be the same in real life. So yeah, I've done an odd track day. I've had a sort of experience days in quite powerful vehicles where you do get the chance to drive them a bit quicker, so that's always fun. Um, but I've also had some near misses, and I think some of that is um, luck when it's a near miss, and some of it does come from sim racing. If you get a car that loses traction and you're in a slide, or bit of oversteer, bit of understeer, having that awareness of which way to turn the wheel to try and correct it, or how to sort of feather the throttle, or not stamp on the brakes and panic, and not close your eyes and hope for the best. I think sim racing can have a really good sort of impact on how to react in those situations. Anyway, so I just wanted to talk about it really. My sim setup at the moment, I've been building it up for um, best part of 20 years, really. Seriously, on a PC, probably for the last 12, I would say. Um, but before that, even games I used to play when I was sort of in my younger days, from PS1 up the PlayStations, the original Xbox, and up through the versions. Had a Dreamcast, for those old enough to remember the Dreamcast. And one of the first things I did on every system I got was save up to get what I thought was a reasonable wheel at the time. So the original um, Xbox wheel. I had a Logitech wheel for my PlayStations through the sort of Gran Turismo days. Um, and I've played all games from, the original Dirt Rally, the original Dirt games, V Rally, like going back that far, Project Gotham Racing, all the grid games, the flat out games that were obviously a lot more arcadey, and everything in between. At the moment, it's Automobilista 2. I've got R Factor 2, Assetto Corsa. I've got Assetto Corsa Competizione, but I rarely play it. I don't really like the force feedback in that one. AC Evo, early access obviously at the moment. Race Room, uh, Dirt Rally 2 at the moment is one of my regulars. So that there's a lot to try, and things are only getting better, um, way closer to reality. And I'm lucky enough at the moment to have a motion rig, so that sets the immersion to the next level. Really, when you can dial these things in along with force feedback and VR, I think that's the closest thing you can get. Some people prefer triples. I don't think I could go back to flat screens after VR. But at the moment, yeah, I've got a MetaQuest 3, a next level racing cockpit, which is using their V3 motion, which moves the seat. It's on a GT cockpit. I think their cockpit's called the GT. So the seat's adjustable. It's really comfy, like a bucket seat. Wheel and pedals, I've got a Fanatec Club Sport 2.5, which is their best sort of belt drive one, but I think at some point, I'm going to go down the direct drive route. On that, I've got the original BMW GT wheel, I've got a Porsche rim, and I've got an F1 style rim that all interchangeable. I generally don't change from the BMW one. The other ones gather dust a bit most of the time, bit of an extravagant purchase really. I use the H pattern gear stick, which is really good. So you've got the full H pattern gearbox, then at a flick of a switch it can become sequential. And what I tend to do sometimes on rally, for example, I'll switch it to sequential, use one of the directions as a handbrake, and do the gears on the paddles. So yeah, and I think games are just getting so advanced, and they're only going in one direction, aren't they? So they're so close to the real thing now, and I think over the next 2 to 5 years, new graphics cards, new capabilities, and I dread to think how realistic things are going to be. VR is only really scratching the surface of what it can do. That will come down in price and be more mainstream, and the clarity and is only going to get better. So yeah, developers working hard all the time to get the best out of the hardware, and I think it's going to be great for people like us, and those coming through, a much younger generation are going to be sort of astounded. When you look back on 10 years ago and see what we used to race on and what we considered to be, good graphics and good games, you'd never expect to be where we are now. And I think in 10 years' time, looking back to where we are now, it's going to be laughable. There were a couple of turning points in life in general where I'd had near misses, and especially in the last 5 years, where there was some snow years ago, and I was just going around a corner and probably going a little bit too quick, but not quick by any means, but too quick for the condition, and had to sort of correct a slide with a combination of light braking, throttle input, turning the wheel, and little things like that make you think, it did wasted hours on Dirt Rally 2, help my brain to sort of know what to do in that situation, or was it just naturally there anyway? So I think it's an interesting discussion. What I think transfers from sim to road is some of the obvious stuff really. It's the improved reaction times, having that ability to spot hazards. There's a lot of studies that show sim racing can keep you alert to these things, and in real life situations, you've got that sort of muscle memory in your brain that you can pick up on these things and perhaps anticipate. Again, the controls as they get more advanced are closer to real life. So turning of the wheel, throttle control, braking smoothly. I think all of that is translatable, and just having that mental anticipation really that things unexpected will happen. The reaction time is a really big one, because when a car loses grip or something unexpected happens, a wheel starts to spin or something slides, you've got a split second to react, and a lot of real life drivers use sims obviously nowadays. So I think that goes to show how it can translate. There were lots of studies. I'm going to put a link to a downloadable PDF if you're that way inclined and want to read it. The Technical University of Denmark. So it's quite a long PDF, and they did a study on driver simulation and specifically improved hazard perception and how they use software to mimic and train, and what they think the benefits are. So that's an interesting read. So do give that a look. Like I say, I'll put a link into that, and there's another link I'll put to a Reddit sort of discussion. But yeah, I think that a lot of that is quite obvious. You've got the throttle and the braking input and the precision required. There's another article that I read about Dirt Rally 2 specifically, which was helping teach muscle memory for smooth and precise inputs, and what to do when these sort of loss of grip things happen. And situational awareness, just being aware of what happens on high-speed corners or what happens on a blind crest. A lot of studies have shown that users of flat screens and VR have got earlier hazard recognition, and can adapt to these sort of quick changes. So that is quite interesting. I'm going to put a link to some more research. There's an Allenberg Racing School, and there's some research on their website about what they found, and back it up with some evidence. Improving hand-eye coordination, spatial awareness, decision making under pressure. It's quite interesting, and how they use it, and how they use it as a training tool. There's also an article on the Sun that questioned 1,000 motorists, and half of them believe that sim racing has made them safer drivers, and they list the same things: reaction time, general awareness, hazard recognition. I'll pop a link to that in there as well. There's also a lot of academic backing for this. Sim training for real world motor racing is been used for a long time, but it's still growing and it's getting better. And supporting the use of simulators for education and collision risk awareness and this sort of stuff. Really interesting stuff. And some of the software that we buy, the software underneath the hood of our Factor 2 is used by real world racing teams for testing setups, and for training drivers. So that stuff is out there, and it has translated into the home market in a different guise, but it's all real world stuff. Of course, there are limitations, and there are things that you can't simulate, and that's interesting. My motion rig is nice, but you simply can't replicate G-force. There are some really good sims that can do their best, but it's the constant G-force that you can't. You can replicate the G-force sort of for an instant if you like, but if you're trying to replicate G-force ongoing for a number of seconds, you simply can't have a motion rig that. Well, I guess you can in theory. You could have one that spins and could spin indefinitely. But for the home sort of market and for the everyday sort of sim racer in their bedroom and stuff, you can't simulate those G-forces. The bumps, the inertia, the sort of the effects that had on the body is just, there's not really much like it. So whilst they can sort of aid and be a training tool, they're never going to replace the real thing. But there's been sim drivers now all around the world. Everybody has probably heard of the Gran Turismo film that was based on a true story of a guy that won a competition. And I wouldn't even call Gran Turismo, not to be a PC sim snob, but I wouldn't call Gran Turismo an actual simulator, to be brutally honest. But it's probably not that far away. And winning that and then translating those to real life driving skills, there's got to be some God-given ability in there somewhere. But to have that be transferable, I think is great, and it's a great story. And he's not the only one. There's people on iRacing that have successfully sort of moved across into a professional motor racing career. So I think that just goes to show that those skills can be transferable. But anyway, going back to the sort of limitations, that yeah, the G-force I think is the big one, and also it's the variables that you get in the real world. I think the some games do a better job than others. I think again, talking about iRacing, I think that can be a bit robotic. You know, people can in a sim, the rubber is simulated building up on the track, but you never get the variation that you'll get in real life with the weather and the possible quick temperature changes, um, track surface changes. You know, a lot of sims do a really good job of people will go onto the gravel on the side and they'll come back on the track, and the game will simulate the gravel coming back on the track, and how that affects the grip of the cars coming around the corner afterwards, and you know, all this really good stuff. But you know, the stuff that there's still a long way to go with some of these variables that, you know, where would you stop? So cars could leak fluid. As far as I'm aware, um, there's no sim out there, certainly in the home market, unless I'm wrong, that, you know, you can have an accident on cars could have an accident, yellow flag comes out, but the next time round on the lap there still might be some fluid and some oil on that part of the corner or what have you. So, you know, there's a lot of stuff that you can't replicate at the moment. I don't think that will ever be something that won't be done. I'm pretty sure that there'll be, you know, if there aren't already, there's probably plans in place somewhere for a modern simulator um, to have that in their game. But yeah, real life road surfaces and sort of real life sort of forces such as the G-forces and real life sort of variables like the weather. Um, I I think, you know, while we're getting close, there's always going to be a gap between reality and simulated. Um, so yeah, I think that's interesting. I think the traffic dynamics can sometimes um, vary more than games can provide. You know, some AI in games is really good, and obviously if you do get the ability to race online, you have the same amount of unpredictability, probably worse than what can be real life, because people don't have to worry about their safety, so they'll dive into corners and they'll take risks. And but you know, in real life, you have motorway driving, which I guess you can get simulated, but you know, it's pedestrians sometimes stepping off the curb and all this sort of stuff. So whilst it can build your awareness and of unpredictable situations in general, it probably you know, can't teach you everything, but there are certainly some transferable skills, and that's what I believe anyway. So really, to share some tips now on how you can set yourself up on a sim to be as real as possible. Proper field of view is really important. There are field of view calculators out there for those of you on a flat screen. It will calculate based on the size of the screen and how far away you're sat, what your field of view should be, and all the good games will allow you to change your field of view in the game. Setting your force feedback on the wheel to be as accurate as possible. Focusing on the simulators that have decent real world physics. Again, some of it is down to personal opinion. Some people think that certain games are real, where racing drivers have endorsed them. You know, GT3 drivers have endorsed different games, but they're on different equipment. So depending on what equipment you've got, that can have a big impact on what feels real. You know, the quality of the wheel, quality of the pedals that you've got. But certainly using a decent field of view will give you the visual sort of fidelity and more realism from that respect. Sim racing will build your habits and can build you consistency. So helping with your reflexes, making sure that you're sort of helping with your memory. You know, you're memorizing tracks, you're reacting to situations. But certainly, you know, you want it to be as real as possible while still finding that balance between what's fun. But yeah, I truly believe that you know, sim racing has helped me in real life situations, and I'm really interested to see what everybody else thinks. If you've got any real world examples that you can share about situations you've been in where you've had to save a slide or risk, you know, or avoid a risk of someone else's, and you think that, you know, you look back on it and think, well, without sim racing, I might not have been able to do that. I'd be really interested to hear about it. So do let me know in the comments, and don't be afraid to disagree, and we can have some dialogue. So thanks, guys. I have been just another sim guy. You've been great. Thanks for making it to the end, and I look forward to hearing your points of view. I'll speak to you in the next one. Peace.